there. So I'm waiting on Mollie to join me for our episode of Coach Meets Therapist. Let's see. Hey there. Just waiting for. Oh, Mollie has joined. Hold on just a second. All right. Should be in the midst of happening as we speak. Connecting. Very exciting. Hi.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. I realize it must be kind of daunting to just be waiting there hoping I show up.
Yeah, I'm just like, whatever. I'm just going to vamp, but
Excellent.
I'm not standing, staring, sitting, staring at
Excellent.
the screen.
Your lighting is
Um,
so much better than mine. Let's just to start this off with calling out the perfectionism here. I'm like, I tried. I genuinely tried. I had some different arrangements. This is where it landed. Hope that's okay.
I like it. I think that we need to model some, like, not that I think it's bad, but I think that we need to model some imperfection here. I
Oh,
mean,
good. Well, I do think it's bad, but I'm okay with it.
well, in terms of modeling imperfection, and shoot, I didn't even get to my meditation this morning, but I found one on imposter syndrome.
Oh, overachieving with the meditation, are you? I mean,
Oh, but I'm not because I didn't even do it. So there you go.
Look,
Imperfect.
I've done like 3 minutes a day for the last 15 days and feel like I deserve a fucking parade.
You
That's,
do.
oh, thank
As a
you.
matter of fact, can I throw you one?
Please, yes, a personal parade. I would like
I
that.
I love I love throwing you personal parades. I'm gonna put can I out your new son?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Can I make him the
Wait,
like the
hold on.
lead?
Is my son gay? Is that what you just told me?
No. I don't
My
know.
6 week
Maybe
old
he
son?
is. He told me. No, I don't know. I
Oh,
mean,
this
out
is
the
good.
fact that you're a new mother. By the way, Molly is a new mother. She has a really adorable son named Wesley. Um, so
Yeah,
he's going to
he's
be the
darling.
Grand Master of the parade.
Yes, the Grand Marshal?
Grand
Grand,
Marshal.
I like
Did
Grand
what did I?
Master though.
Oh well.
Grand
Oh
Master of the parade.
yeah. That's.
Excellent.
I think the Grand Master is not a good thing actually.
Well, if he's going
Um,
to come out, he'll be the Master of a different kind of parade. So,
yeah.
but we'll
Yeah.
be ready for that.
Marshall. Yeah. It'll be good. It'll be great. All of that to say,
Indeed.
um, it is hard, right? Like there's so many areas that we can get perfectionistic about, and I know that I can take the whip out and start lashing myself if I'm not regularly meditating for sure. It's a
Absolutely.
great place to
Absolutely.
start.
I just worked on this article where I was talking about like setting the assignment of daily meditation and then really, really kicking your own ass for having set this assignment that you have no interest in doing and how intensely perfectionism ends up taking a hold on us in that respect, that the judgment is just overwhelming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and just as people I know are here, if you want to ask us any questions, we're going to be sort of talking about some of the questions that we've received, but also talking about perfectionism on the whole. And I think what just kind of came up naturally in conversation is a really interesting point, which is how to be disciplined without being letting perfectionism turn it
Mm,
into an opportunity for being an asshole to yourself. In fact, you wrote an article, I think something like
I
how to
did.
be, yeah, what was it called?
Permission to not be a dick to yourself.
Yeah,
I have a way with words. What can I say?
you do actually
But
have a way with words.
the phrase that I tend to use with clients around this issue, I say compassionate discipline because discipline has such an abusive connotation to it that it's so negative and it's so pejorative and so cruel often that if I
Yeah.
can introduce this idea of what compassionate discipline would look like, and I often ask them, what would compassionate discipline look like here? And I often find that it's just the truth filtered through kindness rather than through our judgment and
Through
our
being a
shame.
dick to yourself.
Exactly, exactly.
Absolutely. That's so funny because I use almost the same exact phrase. I use compassionate self-discipline.
No, good.
And yeah, I have an article that's sitting somewhere ready to be published about just this. And I think it's hard. A lot of us who identify as perfectionists, and speaking of outing yourself, I'm just going to like say with great authority that I am like a recovering perfectionist.
I never even made it to be a perfectionist to recover. I'm like an aspiring perfectionist who's going to beat herself up for not having quite hit the mark of perfectionism anyway.
But is perfectionism like, do you have to? The thing is, you can't attain perfection, right? So it's not as though anyone who's perfectionistic actually attains the mark of perfectionism. I would say we're
Sure.
all aspiring perfectionists who
And
identify as such.
Yeah, and there's also a spectrum here, and I think
For
some of
sure.
us tend to be more successful in terms of hitting our marks of perfectionism than others, and it's certainly something I've seen you overcome so gracefully and with so much
Well,
commitment, and it's
well,
just
likewise.
amazing.
And
Thank you.
I feel like just for those out there that you undersell yourself in terms of your ability to get close to perfection. But that's just my take on the issue.
Thank
But
you.
in terms of compassionate self-discipline, one of the things that I often talk about is parenting and the way
Mm-hmm.
that we look at parenting within the realm of therapy, because the tendency, I think it's introjects, right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
sort of internal voice that we've you know gained from the people who raise us, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, and even from the culture, right? You can have very kind, gentle parents and still, like, we live in a society that tells you that you should be productive 100% of the time, which of course is a
I just wrote this article. There was I referenced this in an article where because I'm a new mom, I am on the breast pump 7 times a day for 15-minute increments. And I discovered that apparently I should be like maximizing my use of that time and learning Italian or coding or, in 15-minute increments.
coding.
If only I had used that time appropriately, I could be fluent in something by now.
Well,
Uh,
and that's
but yeah, that's the idea. It's like we have to be productive every minute. We have to be mindful every minute. We have to be self-evaluating every minute.
every
Really?
minute. I know, and it's I think within the realm of recovery, I think this
Mm-hmm.
is sort of what you're speaking to, and like self-improvement, you can become perfectionistic, which is
Right.
such a beast. It's like, I think people come into treatment and they're like, I want to get better. How do I get better? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you get better by being kind to yourself and doing less. And it's like, wait, what?
Right. You get
I don't
better
know
by
about that.
being in relationship to not being better.
Right. Right.
That's the work.
Yeah.
A client of mine, this is actually a client that you've worked with as well, did ask me last night, please make sure you address procrastination. She said, I'm going to watch on the YouTube. Just please make sure. So I want to mention to you that we have a very specific and heavy-handed request from someone
For
I love very much.
procrastination. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And that was one of the questions that we got too, is the overlap there. And I think it actually sort of dovetails into what I was talking about with the whole parenting thing, because
right,
I
right.
think what happens in my experience with procrastination is that because we've got this really loud societal, potentially parental voice that's saying, like, you should always be productive, you should always be doing something, you should be doing it right and make sure you don't fuck it up,
Right.
that this sort of internal dictator
Mm-hmm.
drives a lot of the time. And then when you get so tired from all of the lashings from the internal dictator, that the tendency is to capitulate to sort of the internal pushover, right?
Right,
That's just going
right.
to be like, you don't have to do anything, you completely, like, lay in bed for hours at a time, which is, and not that I'm saying that there's anything wrong with that
Thank
inherently.
God.
No, and I can speak to that, from my own perspective as well. But I think this idea that you can just let go of everything, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to work. I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm going to, like, it starts to look a lot like just complete permission giving,
Right,
right?
right, right,
Which is
right.
not inherently helpful either, right?
No,
Like,
and that just really just starts to generate a ton more shame,
right,
and contribute to the narrative of what a piece of shit I am, that I cannot accomplish anything, and that this is, yeah,
right,
and that's really what creates so much fear for people around compassion, that they think, oh, this is what compassion looks like.
right.
Compassion looks like laying in bed all day. Compassion looks like the slippery slope into the slow devolution of into laziness or whatever we're so terrified of.
Right, exactly. That it's that somehow you're going to, like, turn into some sort of navel gazing, sloth. I don't
Right,
know.
right, right.
I
Which
want
if go
an
ahead.
illustration. I just want an illustration of a navel gazing sloth
Yeah,
now. But
if anyone watches this and is willing to post their own illustration of a nasal gazing
navel
oh my
gazing
god,
sloth.
navel.
And thank you, Kelly. Sorry, real quick. Let's be
No,
imperfect about
you be
this.
on topic. I'm gonna work on
Um,
this.
Kelly said that we're amazing. Thank you, Kelly. That's
Thank you,
awesome.
Kelly.
Appreciated.
So appreciated. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the fear is that you're going to just turn into, like, a blob, and that you're
Right.
not going to do anything. And it's not that all or none, but it can become that if you allow the dictator or the perfectionistic side of you to
Right,
be
right.
constantly in the driver's seat.
Hmm.
And so the reason I was talking about that in terms of parenting is because the tendency, like within the world of parenting, we talk about authoritarian parenting, we
Hmm.
talk about passive parents, and we talk about the sort of middle ground, which is the authoritative
Hmm.
parent.
Hmm.
And that's sort of what we're striving for internally, is that, and that's sort of that the compassionate self-discipline or compassionate discipline,
Right,
where
right.
you're just acknowledging like, oh, okay, like I did something that I prefer I hadn't done,
Hmm.
without taking
Hmm.
out the whip and starting to like,
Right,
lash
right.
yourself.
So again, like addressing the truth without the shame. The truth, like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, rather than the narrative about here's what it implies about me because I did this, or because
Right.
I failed, or because I whatever the narrative happens to be.
Totally. And that's the perfectionism, right? Is
Right,
where we start diving into all of the judgments of what we've
right,
done instead of just, oh, well, I was imperfect. Of course I was. I'm a
right.
human.
The other piece of perfectionism in relation to procrastination I want to touch on is the way that it tends to paralyze us to in terms of even starting anything, because
Totally.
there's such a trajectory that's expected of perfectionism that it ends up being, why bother, why
Right.
at all, if it's not gonna meet my standard, or starting realizing it's not gonna meet the standard and quitting halfway through because fuck it, if I can't do this perfectly, why do it at all?
Right. Right.
And really not valuing the process, like really being so results oriented that you miss the experience of the process. And
Totally.
anytime we're going to be results oriented rather than process oriented, the perfectionism is going to have us hostage. It's just how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely. I couldn't agree more.
I'm pivoting here. I'm
Oh,
distracted by my
pivot.
shitty light. Oh, this is so much better. Why didn't I set
Oh,
something up right here?
come on.
Well, now I have to hold it.
Because you're
Okay,
imperfect.
excellent. I'm just gonna do this.
I think it's great.
Thank
I'm
you.
into it. I'm into it. Um, wait, where were we? We were talking about,
Perfectionism arresting progress because we can't even start.
right, right. I can't remember where I read this quote, but something on, probably on Instagram some time ago, that said something like, be willing to suck at something, right?
Right, that's right.
And there's so much ego involved in perfectionism, right?
Absolutely.
That
Yeah,
you're
it's
not allowed
crushing.
to suck, right? And how do you ever learn if you're not allowed to suck?
So I got obsessed with Duolingo, I guess it was last year, and decided I was going to learn Italian. It was a thing, and I was doing whatever ritual I decided, like, I can do this many times a day, and this makes me a good person, right? And we were also going to Rome at the end of that year. So I focused on these. I got my language. I figured got to Italy, could not allow myself to speak one fucking word because I was so terrified that they were going to judge my crappy accent or that the words
Oh
wouldn't come
no.
fast enough. Or like, again, at least I allowed myself to learn it, but no ability to execute because the fear of failing was so great. Like
Yeah.
permission to fail just wasn't there,
Yeah.
which
And there's
is
so much freedom in the permission to fail. But I totally actually relate to that. I listened to some sort of audiobooks before I went to Italy
uh-huh.
many years ago, and I was like, I'm gonna launch into this, and you get there, and it's like, uh,
That's like io sono una ragazza. That's the extent of what I got there.
you
But yeah,
sono una
really,
ragazza.
like,
What does ragazza mean? I don't even know.
girl, I am a
Girl.
girl. That's what I'm
Oh,
announcing in Italian.
good
But that
job.
was the only thing I could announce. I might be able to ask for a bottle of water, but if they only had water by tap, I was fucked because I only could say bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very, very difficult to be a perfectionist learning a new language.
Yes.
But that's also like that's the arrogance and narcissism of I should expect myself to be able to speak fluently or at least convincingly in order to allow myself to take that risk, right? Which is
Right.
such a lie, such
Right.
a lie.
Yeah. Well, and I think if we look at something, I mean, it's certainly true of things like language, if you're learning a language or an instrument. I know that for
Hmm.
myself and how
Oh
many
yeah.
times I've tried to pick up a guitar or ukulele or whatever. Um, but I think it's particularly true of things that don't, that really you can't ever attain the same level of mastery around, right? So,
Say more. Yeah.
well, because you can get a fluency with like an instrument, right? And
Sure.
Mollie plays piano, for instance, beautifully.
Yeah.
It's true. It's accurate.
Okay.
Don't listen to her. She has no idea what she's talking about. Um, so, no, but I think the reality is that you can gain a fluency around these things
Right.
that, you know, by and large, you're sort of considered you play piano, right?
Sure.
When
Sure.
it comes to recovery, that kind of fluency, I don't know, it's a lot, first of all, it's a lot more nebulous, but
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
also, it's like, I don't feel like it's as linear, right? Like you're not, with recovery, I think almost the self-compassion is the barometer, right?
Right, right. Oh, I say that all the time. That the strength of my recovery is in direct correlation to how much self-compassion I can have at any given moment.
Totally.
I have a client right now, and she's a dietitian, and she's really successful, and also a health coach, and struggles in her own recovery. And she's been in recovery from the eating disorder, disordered eating, body image, I mean, all of that noise for years, and yet really has an expectation that the noise is going to disappear for her,
Mm-hmm.
and has a tremendous amount of shame that her recovery has not reflected what she thinks is the mastery
Mm-hmm.
of this material. Again,
Yeah.
like that, this is what you're saying, that there's some end goal and some expectation here when it comes to defining our recovery, defining our expectations of our recovery, and how perfectionism just arrests that so sadly.
Well, because it becomes about doing the recovery stuff in
Mm-hmm.
order in order to get to that end goal, right? As opposed to doing it unconditionally just for the sake of doing it because it's the kind of thing that's going to make you feel better by its very nature,
Sure, sure, absolutely,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. So, can you give an example of that? Just to really
Ooh,
nail you to the wall and put you on the
yeah,
spot. I'm
hold
so
on. Let me.
sorry.
By the way, I'm just going to take a moment to say hi to the people who've joined, and if you have any questions, please feel free
Oh yeah,
to chime
absolutely.
in at any point.
Well, I'm gonna try and
Um,
set my phone up here. Let's see if I can do this fucking perfectly.
so wait, what's the example that I'm giving? I'm giving
Oh,
an example of,
what it looks like. You were talking about being able to take a recovery-oriented action, not because it lands us closer to recovery, but because it is the right thing to do, the kind thing to do for oneself in the moment that actually feels
yeah.
better.
So one thing that's come up recently in my work with someone is acceptance, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
tendency to like, I'm going to, and this, I guess that happens a lot now that I think about it, but like, I'm going to accept these thoughts. It happens a lot with intrusive thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to accept the presence of intrusive thoughts so that they go away,
Right,
right?
right,
Because
right, right,
I'm gonna like perfect my brain. So if I could just accept it correctly, then it's gonna go. The
right.
great irony, of course, it's such a beast, right? Is that if you actually genuinely accept your thoughts and their presence, they
Mm-hmm.
become less frequent, they become less bothersome, even if they do arise.
Right, right.
But so instead of trying to sort of pointedly accept, like I'm going to accept so that this thing happens,
Mm-hmm.
right? It
Mm-hmm.
becomes about just being willing to actually genuinely accept without expectation.
Right. This is almost exactly what you just said, but one of the examples I end up using with clients a lot is this question of, would you rather have the body of your dreams here? This is for clients who struggle with disordered eating or body image
Yeah.
material. Would you rather have the body of your dreams or freedom from the whole conversation? And
Right.
it's really a paralyzing question to ask because they're like, well, what does freedom? Does freedom mean how much? What kind of body do I have with freedom? No, no. Freedom means fucking freedom across the
Like,
board, like no noise at
yeah,
all.
we're putting
Um,
the body thing aside entirely in this.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And then of course they're like, well, can I accept it as a strategy? Can I go with I want freedom as a strategy to get? No, of course not.
No.
But no,
And that's the thing. Sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, no, no. Please go.
I was just going to say that like the thing about perfecting anything,
Hmm.
is that it's all in the results, right? Like
Hmm.
it's not about process. I think you actually mentioned that earlier on in our discussion today.
Hmm.
Um, and especially around this idea of perfecting life. Like you were talking about like, with the breast pumping 15 minutes, 7 times a day and trying to sort of uh, be perfectly efficient with that
Yes,
time,
how do I
right?
maximize that time? And there are, by the way, there are mommy forums where they're reading Anna Karenina during those 15 minutes increments.
Stop
They're
it.
doing mindfulness exercises during those 15 minutes. I'm watching, America's Next Top Model.
Which
Because
cycle?
I can't not of all of the cycles,
All of the
all of the
cycles.
cycles. Yeah, no, but that's what I want to do at that time. But I'd be lying if I didn't say I had a degree of noise. Like I could be reading some Charles Dickens right now, and I could be learning German, or I could be, not that I actually feel compelled to do any of those things, but I could. And
You
that there
could
are
be reading
people
about
out.
treatment. That's
I
my one. I like that
uh,
one. That's
oh,
a good
right, right,
one.
right.
Yeah.
I should be getting better at this work, right?
Yeah, I should be a better therapist. That's always a good one to go
When in
to. That's
fact,
proof backed trying to
right.
therapize people.
Well,
Yep.
I maintain that with a perfectionistic tendency, watching America's Next Top Model is the right intervention to make us better clinicians,
Yes.
because that's the development of self-compassion. Then I have to like butt up against that part of my brain that's like, hey, lazy piece of shit, you could do something a little bit more productive with this time. You're not
Right.
just like feeding a child with your body, but you're doing something. Could we be a little productive here? I'll snap my fingers more. Maybe it'll help.
I like it.
Um,
No, but I mean, one of the languaging, some of the languaging that you use that I love is this idea of courageous act, right? And I think
mm-hmm.
that it varies from person to person. And if you are a perfectionist, the courageous act is often to do the unproductive thing, right?
Right. That's the intervention on the belief system that I'm a piece of shit if I don't. So if we want to be wrong about that, if we want to prove ourselves wrong, that I'm a piece of shit if I don't achieve, then the intervention is to risk not achieving. Let's
Right.
find out if we're a piece of shit.
Well, and here's
It's a risk.
the rub of all of this is that by being perfectionist and constantly trying to get you're constantly digging,
Right.
constantly trying to do the thing, you're never going to hit the end, right? Like the end doesn't exist. So you're just constantly proving to yourself how much you suck and you're imperfect, right? Like that. So the only way to get out of that is to make a choice to step back and not be in the constant doing and the constant productive, right?
Right. And to want to be wrong about that. That if I'm
Mm.
speaking to a client who's trying to argue for why they are a piece of shit or why perfectionism is necessary for them, and I find myself going, hold on, if I was to make the argument for why you're not a piece of shit or why you don't need to achieve so much, do you know you would fight me on that? And they're like, well, yes, of course. And here's the question. Don't you want me to be right?
Yeah.
Don't you want me to be right that you're not a piece of shit if you don't achieve, or that your perfectionism is not necessarily what you have to adhere to? That
Yeah.
it requires the perfectionist to want to be wrong about the perfectionism rather
Right.
than just looking to support the idea that they're perfect or that perfectionism is, the way to go. That was a little
Yeah.
nebulous, forgive me, but a little confusing.
No,
But
no, no. I don't think it is. I think what I was just thinking about is the fact that I don't think it's that, and maybe this is just my own take on it, that they're trying, that they want you to be wrong.
sure,
It's that they have to provide every single argument
right.
to make sure that they're not wrong.
Right. I've got to have so much love for this specific client I'm thinking of who does that. And I said, hold on, you're fighting me pretty hard here. Do you know
Yeah.
that I'm going to win this battle at the end of it? So either you can just let me win and we can move to the freedom
Next
here,
stage, yeah.
or you can continue to test this out. But you're right that really it is about them presenting fears. Them, like it's us, presenting
Yeah, exactly.
presenting our fears and going, are you sure it's safe to believe this? Are you sure it's safe? Are you like, I'm really just trying to poke holes in our argument to find out, can we really trust that we don't have to be fucking perfect to be okay?
Well, because I think within the realm of perfectionism, it's never perfecting ourselves based on our own standards. It's perfecting ourselves based on every single standard that exists. And so,
Same more.
like, well, for instance, I think I might have mentioned this when we talked before about body stuff, but like, you're not holding yourself to your own values as they pertain to body, right? Like, oftentimes you can look at your values and be like, actually, like, I have so much respect for somebody who's in like living in a curvier body who has no noise about it, right? Like that's what I want personally. And yet I'm feeling like I'm being held up to these societal standards that I should look a certain way. And so what I'm saying is, I think when we get caught up in perfectionism, we're getting caught up in trying to meet all of the standards as if that were a possibility versus, meeting our own standards.
Sure, sure. And there's also this element of having other standards for other people, but
Right.
very perfectionistic standards for ourselves. And there
But
are
that's
so
the
many,
thing.
yeah.
I think that the perfectionistic standards for ourselves are not ours. And I think our standards for others
Mm-hmm.
are ours.
Are
Like,
ours, right.
right.
Right, right.
Um,
No, that's
in terms of,
fascinating.
we were talking about earlier too, the sort of perfecting life thing, and the sort of getting like the getting to a destination. And one thing
Mm-hmm.
that I wanted to sort of circle back around to in there is, let's get really big. Let's talk meaning of life shit.
Oh,
Um,
good. I was not prepared for an existential conversation on a Friday midday, but here we go. All right.
Sorry, that's what's happening. Um, is that I think that there's this idea, and maybe it is driven by Western culture,
Mm-hmm.
and this idea that we're like trying to produce and get to an end game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm pretty sure that life isn't about getting anywhere. Whoa, sorry.
I
I
feel like we
told
should
you I
have
was.
this massive moment of silence while my little mind explodes. It's not. What have we been doing all along?
I know.
No,
I don't know.
I, I get it. I agree. There's this Banksy quote that I had put up on Instagram the other day. That's something to the effect of, "When you get tired, don't quit. Just learn to rest."
Yeah,
Which so endorses this idea that yeah, we're looking at journey, not destination here. Um,
absolutely.
but
Yeah, I'm
and
actually. Oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, no,
Sorry.
no. Please.
No, I feel very talkative today. I talked all over you, but I'm in the midst of writing my vows. So for those of you who don't know, I'm getting married, um,
Yay!
and which is really fun. So I'm just like in I hope
And
I hope TJ doesn't watch, but
we have really high expectations for those vows, by the way. All of us watching. In fact, those
well,
of us who are not watching also have really high expectations. They better be fucking primo. Step up.
come on. I actually am feeling really proud of the vows, but I think one of the things that I was writing about in there is that the more that I live, the more I
Mm-hmm.
recognize that it's not, oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, thanks, guys. Uh, but that it's not so much about that all of life is in the moments, right? And I'm not saying anything that's particularly profound or that a million people haven't said before, but talking about these sort of moments that occur
Mm-hmm.
in my life with him that are wonderful and special, and that it's these tiny little moments that make up a life. And so I just the reason I brought that up is because it's been on my mind, and obviously like this idea of being in the journey, right, as
Yeah.
opposed to being like the throttling towards some end game, which by the
Right.
way, the end game is death. So
Yeah.
maybe
So
you want to
yeah,
slow down a little bit.
dream big, I guess. But yeah, that idea, the go through all of these bumper sticker sayings. But oh, did I lose you?
I lost you for a second. I don't know what people are
Oh no,
saying. Oh, there. I can see you
okay.
again. Bumper
I don't
sticker
think I was saying
sayings is where I
anything
lost you.
particularly profound. Yeah, these bumper sticker sayings about it's the journey and not the destination and all that really makes sense in a different construct when we're actually in real time with it. When we're going, oh, this is right now. This is that obviously anxieties in the future and depression in the past and
Yeah.
all of that noise and those kinds of phrasings, but. That we're really talking about. Oh no, the breath right now. No, the breath right now. That
Right.
there's really an immediacy to the presence and the yumminess and the richness of what we're talking about, of what this
Right.
life is. Anyhow, yeah, you get
Perfectionism
really
really robs
existential.
us of. No, but that's what perfection robs us of, right? We're constantly
Right.
trying for the next thing. We miss it. We miss
Mm-hmm.
all of the like the yummy. I love that word, yummy imperfection. But I think being maybe going into more concrete, and I know that we had talked about this briefly when we were just talking about perfectionism.
Right.
Was like how it attaches to certain aspects of life, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
happen to be in this new role as mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can relate just in being like a new stepmom to two
Mm-hmm.
boys and wanting it's so compelling to get caught up in wanting to do that perfectly.
Mm.
Um,
There's this interesting dynamic between my husband and I that I'm noticing when he's with the baby. He's always had expectations of himself as he's going to be a great dad, and he is a phenomenal dad. But
of
people have
course,
told him forever, you're going to be a fabulous dad. You're going to be so present. You're going to be so loving. And he actually has crazy expectations of himself then.
Mm.
I happen to be someone who has no expectations of myself as a mother. Like I'm just happy to learn along the way. But because of that, I'm freed up to be really imperfect and ask for help
Mm.
and try and get resources and go like, I don't know. I can't understand the onesie and the snapping pattern and all of that. Whereas he's the one who's getting frustrated with himself. He's the one who has a little bit of shame about calling his brother to ask a question about how to do X, Y, and Z, whether it's parenting or diapering or whatever the basics happen to be, because of that perfectionistic expectation. That having no
Yeah.
expectation is extremely liberating. That was
Very, very
period. That
much
was the end of my
so.
sentence.
No, but I think that the point that expectations and perfectionism are really bound up in one another is
Right,
an
right.
important piece here, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think I've certainly had an expectation before I go on. Anyone who's joined us since the last time I said this,
Oh,
we're
right.
pontificating on perfectionism and how we can work at with it and how we look at it.
And how it
Um,
works us sometimes, just me, maybe both of us.
no, 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 no.
Perfectionism
I
works
sorry, you
us, how
broke
we
up
have
in
it
my
and it has
ear.
us.
I couldn't hear
Oh, I'm
you
so
for a
sorry.
moment. But now I can hear. No, no, you're like, oh, maybe just me. And I would have been nodding ferociously if I could have heard you in real time. But
We are
yeah, so any
including imperfection in this broadcast here.
right now, right now. So
Right.
if anyone has any questions, please feel free to chime in. We'd love to discuss anything that you're interested in this realm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So, but yeah, certainly expectations with regard to how, like, I've always thought of myself as like a sort of naturally warm person and somebody who's going
Mm-hmm.
to be like really well predisposed to being a mom, and
Right,
certainly
right.
find my own expectations coloring my experience with helping raise these two awesome kiddos. Like, of
Absolutely. What do you notice? How do you notice it come up?
um a lot of anxiety about their future and making sure that I provide them the right information, whatever
Oh, yeah,
that
you were
is.
single-handedly responsible for introducing them to mindfulness and them having a positive experience. If it's a negative
Of
experience with
course I
mindfulness,
am.
they're fucked. They'll never meditate. They'll never transcend anything. Like,
No, totally. I mean, it really runs the gamut. It's like,
mm-hmm.
you know, do they have the support they need school wise? Do they have the
Right.
support they need in terms of like emotional well-being? If and I think that this is something I've talked to moms about too, is um like this, when you get frustrated, which you invariably do
Sure.
because we get frustrated with people, period. But kids have a lot of energy, and I
Uh-huh.
don't at the end of a day of talking to a lot of people about some of the heavier stuff that's going on in their life. And so
Sure,
when
sure.
I get frustrated, it's like, oh, I'm being imperfect, right? Like I'm not
Well,
being the
right, right,
go.
and you have this identity of yourself as warm and loving and giving,
Right.
which, by the way, you totally are. I mean, any
Oh,
of
thank
us
you.
who have an identity, as soon as we try and be that identity, it all goes to hell. It's when we're not trying to have that identity that we're able to actually have access to it. Wow,
Yeah.
I totally lost my train of thought. I was going somewhere awesome, and I promise, it just like left in the ethers.
I
Forgive
swear to
me.
God, it happens to me several times every day,
Parenting, good to know. Parenting,
all the time.
perfectionism. Where was I? Yeah, it's something.
Ooh,
Oh yeah, the yeah,
warmth.
in your just yeah, the having that identity of warmth and going, well, I have to be warm here. When in fact, like the authentic and potentially what you're seeing as imperfect expression would be, can you guys knock it off? Which is not necessarily the warmest expression, or
No,
even something more heavy-handed potentially. But that
yeah,
it gives you permission to have an authentic response rather than I have to adhere to my identity as a warm maternalistic figure, which would
right.
actually be more robotic in the moment.
Or it allows me to make space for those feelings without
Mm,
necessarily taking it out on them, right? Like
mm-hmm.
if I can own the fact that like, oh, right now I am frustrated. It's okay. I can make space for the frustration and be calm in the way that I approach them because I'm like I'm having compassion for my own experience in a moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Right, right.
that changes the game. It allows me to be more of the person that I really want to be in those
Mm,
moments. But
Right.
again, perfectionism doesn't allow for any of that, right?
Sure.
Perfectionism is like you shouldn't feel anything other
Mm.
than like love and compassion 24/7 if you're a good person, which okay, good luck.
Yeah, heaven forbid, heaven forbid. With my pregnancy and anticipating being a parent, I did a ton of work in therapy around my fears of like my frustration or my selfishness or fears that like I'm going to be the one that shakes the baby and all of that. And my therapist had actually said, look, the mothers that we're worried about are the mothers who are not saying this stuff, or the mothers who are not getting frustrated or not
Right,
concerned about getting frustrated. And
right,
then including more room, including more oxygen for all of these feelings, which are normal parts of parenting or
right.
life in general here.
Yeah,
That really we're looking not to exclude these parts, but to include these parts.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I want to look at the time just because I want to make
Oh,
sure.
great.
Okay, we got no, we've got time. We've got like 25 minutes, but I thought maybe we could talk about some of the practicality in terms
Oh,
of
sure.
how we can work with perfectionism, right? Like we were talking about it in sort of broad strokes in terms of how it
Mm-hmm.
applies to us, but like, some of the, I guess, the tools, like I know,
Yeah.
for instance, that mindfulness has been in so many ways imperative
Right.
in my own journey and the journey of those that I work with. Um, and so, perhaps we could talk about how mindfulness can support us in living with perfectionistic tendencies. I also think that I'm losing you. Oh dear. This is the imperfect Instagram live right here. I'm all about it. Can you hear me? Oh no. I don't know if you can hear me or hear Mollie. Oh,
Oh,
can you
yep.
hear
Are we
me?
good? Did it happen? We could do this for
Ground
another
ground
25 minutes.
control to Major Tom. I think we're here. You're
Okay,
still there's
excellent.
like a circle on your face. I don't know if it's on my end or your end, so forgive me. Um, if it's on mine. But
So you're
yeah, I
talking
was just
about
thinking that maybe we could
mindfulness.
talk about yeah, and I like maybe talking about how we can use the practice of mindfulness to support living with perfectionistic tendencies.
Sure,
And
sure.
maybe like some sort of action. This is me, like very like linear and
Yeah.
like tool based, but um, talking about how to exercise self compassion as well.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll just throw out this before we maybe we go to mindfulness at some point. But Kristen Neff talks about there being three components to self compassion. She talks
Hmm.
about mindfulness, just awareness of what's going on in any given moment. Oh, I'm feeling sad. Oh, I'm
Hmm.
feeling angry. I'm feeling frustrated. And then also self kindness. So
Okay.
sort of speaking to yourself as you would to a friend who is in similar circumstances, because who knows why, but we're almost always nicer to friends than we are to
Right.
ourselves.
Right.
Um, and then the third component of recognizing the common humanity of the
Hmm.
experience, right? Like it's
Mm.
probably really understandable, like and normal that I would be frustrated in these
Right.
circumstances. It's okay to
Right.
feel this. Um,
I like
I don't know,
I
like
like the
any.
tool of being able to, and this is essentially the labeling that you had referenced, but the tool of being able to identify it from like 30,000 feet, almost like an anthropologist going, oh, the human is anxious. Oh, the human is really frustrated. Oh, check it out. The human is tearing that person a new one. Isn't that fascinating?
The
To really
human.
just be to just be an observance of what's going on and sort of narrate that with some distance. So we're not complete hostages to the emotional material.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have a little bit of a slant on that. I often talk about uh, viewing your emotions as if you were an alien that had just been injected into your body, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, what's this one? This is different. Oh,
This is rage. How fascinating!
what's rage about? How? Oh,
Right,
okay. It's got a feeling in my belly area, I guess.
right,
Interesting.
right.
But that having a level of objectivity, right,
Mm-hmm.
around any of these experiences is going to free us up from some of the judgment around it, which is where perfectionism lives, right? Is in this sort of
Right,
judgment
right.
zone.
Absolutely. And that's the second arrow in Buddhism that
Yeah,
they talk about. They, who is this they, the Buddhists, that they
we're
talk about.
Buddhish.
Sure, Buddhist, sure, I like it. But that the first piece is whatever mistake was made, and then the second arrow is the judgment about that piece that we're
Yeah,
absolutely cut off at the knees by, and that's what eliminates any progress. It's not so much the awareness that it becomes in mindfulness is the awareness that maybe I don't want to operate that way. That's
yeah,
not a problem. It's the judgment of what a piece of shit I am for operating that way
right,
that ends up being so arresting here. So it's not the behavior that we're looking to change; it's the reaction that we're looking to transform. Is that right?
right. Yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Um, yeah, so I think so if we look at that as it pertains to, let's take another arena where perfectionism shows up, maybe like work. Work is a good
Mm,
one,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Um, that if you find yourself having made a mistake or said something to a colleague that you thought in the aftermath, like, oh, that's boneheaded, right? Like, I can't
Mm-hmm.
believe I just said that. Um, that it's not the thing that you said so much as it is
Right.
the judgment of the thing that you said that is the suffering that we have any control over, right? Because the thing about being a human is you're bound to be imperfect
Mm-hmm.
all the time, all the time. I mean,
All the
maybe that's
time.
just me.
No, 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 no. All the time. Have you noticed my lighting situation here? Or do you, come on,
I
come
love
on.
it. I really
Yeah.
do. I do.
Thank
Good.
you.
It's the imperfect Instagram live. I love it. Um, yeah, I guess even talking about the sort of objective viewpoint is the mindfulness component, right? Like we kind of
Mm-hmm.
slipped into that naturally, but um, I guess maybe explaining that a little bit, this present moment awareness without judgment, right? And I guess the
Mm-hmm.
without judgment part lends itself particularly to those of us who identify as perfectionistic.
So when I'm
Um,
working with clients around like cultivating mindfulness, I'm often actually assigning them the experience of meditating for short periods of time, and meditation
mhm.
not with any expectation of it allowing them to levitate, allowing them to change their thoughts, allowing them to change anything. In fact, that it's purely about developing the muscle of being able to observe what's going on.
Yes,
Which, of course, this is not like I'm prescribing a skill that I've already mastered. I need this medicine too. In fact,
totally.
constantly. But I'm wondering what sort of exercises you end up offering to clients to help them cultivate the skill of mindfulness.
Mindfulness meditation is foremost among them. I think that
Mm,
it's hugely
mm-hmm.
important because what you're doing is cultivating, it's not just the awareness, but it's the flavor of awareness, right?
Right,
That you're practicing, and you're practicing it in a vacuum, right? Your eyes are
right.
closed. There's very little competing for your attention. So if you start berating yourself, you're more likely to catch it anyway, right? Than if you're like in the midst of a conversation with somebody else and your
Right.
attention's going to be split. So
Mm-hmm.
um,
And that the
meditation
experience of
is
that really helps us divide from the idea that we are our thoughts. Because if we're really in, as you say, in the vacuum and noticing that the thoughts are being generated regardless of what's going on, like there's no stimuli, and yet there's stimuli. If
yeah,
that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
That's fascinating, and it allows us a bit of division. Going, oh, this is coming from somewhere. This is just being kind of spit out. That
generated. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. How do I work with this in a way that I don't I don't necessarily have to make it mean anything about me. And so I think that's the curious part you're talking about unraveling.
totally. And I think at a very basic level, if you're not aware of your thoughts and your beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
how can you get any space from perfectionism? Because
Right.
if you don't have any awareness of that, then it's just I'm a piece of shit because I'm not performing at this level, right?
Right, right. So talk us through, when you say mindfulness, it's such a buzzword. And
Yeah,
when
it
you say
is.
mindfulness meditation, if someone was watching this and was like, all right, Lauren, talk me through mindfulness meditation. I have 5 minutes right now. What do I need to do? What is it?
All right. I love it. Um, so generally speaking, I'll do like a focused attention meditation, and the instruction there is to anchor in some sort of present moment experience.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes we will use the breath I love how I'm
Okay.
explaining this to you as if you don't know this, but I know that you do. Um, but
I like hearing different people teach it because there's so many different
totally.
portals into the conversation, and there are some ways that I teach it that clients really respond to, and there are other ways that I teach it where they don't. So I like getting other language
Yeah,
for it as well.
totally. By the way, my audio has failed. I'm grabbing another headphone. Hold, please.
Oh no, this has been like the real roller coaster of imperfection here. I love it.
I love it. It's so good. So where were we? Focused attention, meditation, anchoring in present moment sensation. And when I say anchoring, I'm just talking about resting your awareness very
Mm-hmm.
gently on an experience. Like I said, oftentimes we'll use the breath, but it doesn't have to be the breath. Sometimes, especially if I'm working with somebody with any sort of panic disorder, right? That can be actually really triggering for them to
Okay.
use the breath.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be an exposure down the line, but I'm probably not going to start there. So using things like sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hear in the background right now like a slight drone of traffic, right? Like that you could, if you're
That's
meditating,
all of
right?
Venice Boulevard happening here. This is the traffic
It's
is
okay. I
my
don't know if
fault,
you
not
can
her
hear,
fault.
yeah, I don't know if you can hear the crows around my place, so it's all
Winter is
good. But
coming.
winter is
Sorry.
coming, Jon Snow. Um, but yeah, so to be aware of something in the present moment, so sound, breath, the experience, like the felt experience of breathing, the felt experience of your body against certain things, right? Like your
Mm-hmm.
hands against your lap. I find that to be hard because it's not as dynamic as some of these
Mm-hmm.
other things. So holding your attention there can be quite challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But what my basic instruction there is to rest your attention and then notice when your mind gets pulled away, right? And you'll
Mm-hmm.
probably notice mid conversation with yourself that like, oh, I'm on some other topic, like I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to have for lunch, or I'm thinking about, what a shit job I did, when I was giving that presentation or whatever the thing
Right.
is
Right.
in that moment, right? And then to go like, ah, I caught myself, good job me, right? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think it becomes a practice of a very specific kind of awareness, right? It's
Right.
got a loving tenderness. It's non-judgmental, right? You're not saying like I suck because my mind wandered off. It's like, oh yeah, it did that thing because it does that thing.
Right.
I
Right. The
caught it.
brains are gonna brain. Brains are gonna
Yeah,
brain.
brains are gonna brain. They do
So
it
what
so much. And
what you're
then
talking about is like it's perfectionism in the context of mindfulness.
yes.
Perfectionism about mindfulness. That okay, if I'm going to be mindful, this I know this is very meta. It's not that meta,
It's
but if I'm going to be mindful, I'm going to be fucking perfectly mindful. I'm going to nail that mindfulness. I'm
oh
not
my
going to have
gosh.
one thought while I sit.
Yep.
All right,
And I
let's see
hear
it.
it
You let
all
me
the
know how that goes.
time.
Mm-hmm.
My power is low. My power is low.
Oh
See,
no, did I lose you?
no,
Your power is
that was
low. That's
another
okay.
technical snafu. Um, so where were we? So, but yeah, the I want to talk about a particular story of like my journey in meditation. One of the first times I recognized that I was thinking when I didn't think I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking, which is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But before I go there, I think uh, yes, it's all about this sort of tendency. Perfection is in everything. It really is. It's
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. It's insidious. Um, and so, but to have this opportunity to notice something without that like self berating quality, you're
Mm-hmm.
practicing having a different way of relating to yourself
Yeah,
by
it's a very
practicing
different
meditation.
muscle.
Yeah, very different
Absolutely,
muscle.
absolutely. I'm sorry, I'm
When
reading
you're
this. I did
meditating,
meditation, made mine too clear. I see
no,
that
CD
worse.
went
Oh,
worse. Yeah, well,
please.
I
Yeah,
think
this is your territory.
yeah, it's hard because you are in a vacuum, right? And so I'm not sure still. Well, I think the thing is that you're in a vacuum with your thoughts. Your thoughts, especially if you have like a puro thought-based OCD, like all of a sudden they have free reign.
Right,
And
right.
the idea within OCD treatment is that the thoughts themselves are not the problem. And so it is about relating to these thoughts differently, which is where, again, this practice of noticing non judgmentally is indispensable.
Mm-hmm,
It's so
mm-hmm,
important to just be like, ah, look, I don't need to perfect my mind. I just need to be willing to let my mind be imperfect. and
Right.
it has to be allowed to include all of these kind of strange thoughts that keep popping in out of nowhere that, in all honesty, I'd probably prefer I didn't have.
Sure.
Um,
And the
but
practice of disengaging from the judgment is in and of itself. And here we are, like coming back full circle. It is a compassionate discipline, but it is a discipline how to engage with these thoughts smoothly.
it's
Oh no, I lost you again.
I know. I know. I'm losing you too. Absolutely not to judge the thoughts. Just let them be. Sorry, I just read that as, but I think you're back now. See them like the clouds. Exactly, right? Your
Yes, I am
whole
back.
awareness is the
I don't know where I
sky,
went.
and then the clouds are floating by. I don't know. I may have gone somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
so whatever. But yes, that's exactly it. Is to be willing to just notice, and then to notice when you've drifted off on a cloud as well, right? Like, and just be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I drifted
Mm-hmm.
off on a cloud. Of course I did that. Um, can I
Right.
can I regale with a moment, because I think it can be really helpful
Please.
in terms of beginning meditation. I remember, and I think it was in grad school actually, when I was meditating, and I realized we were in a class, and it was like a group meditation. I realized that I was judging my breath, and I was saying, like, I was thinking, like,
Ooh.
oh, I'm not breathing right. I should be breathing in a
Uh-huh.
specific way, and I'm not breathing that way. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm judging myself right now, and I had no idea. That's how insidious it is. I think is that it can just, I don't know if, did I lose you? I don't know. Oh, I think I have you again.
I'm here.
Do you hear me? I don't know what the internet
This is going to
is
be fascinating
happening.
to see how this whole thing goes, given the breaks and things like that.
I know. I'm intrigued for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, all I was saying is that I was so fascinated to recognize that I was applying perfectionism to something as innocuous as the breath, right? Like, who cares if I, like, it's not about breathing right. There is no right
Mm-hmm.
way to breathe. You just make sure that you're breathing, right? And all of a sudden I
Right.
was like
Right.
in it, like, well, that person over next to me is breathing better than me. Like, what? It doesn't make any sense.
Are
Um,
they more alive than you? They're keeping
they're
themselves
more,
alive better than you? Yeah.
they are. They're doing a better job of breathing, obviously.
Quite a skill.
So,
Quite a skill.
yeah. But what about you? Other than meditation, is there anything else that you encourage people to do to support their own mindfulness practice?
In terms of mindfulness itself, that for those that really struggle with going into like true mindfulness, traditional mindfulness, I like metta for that practice
Mm-hmm.
because it's a way of having an anchor that is that's language that has a particular thought or intention behind it, and the
Mm-hmm.
metta practice is just loving kindness and self love and all of that. So phrases that become repeated, and you can pick really what those phrases are. Although there are traditional phrases to refer to, like "May I be happy," "May I be healthy," "May I be peaceful," "May I be awake," "May all
Live
beings
with
know
ease.
freedom." Yeah, exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
No, I love
It,
that. Too. I'm
it
with
looks
you
like
on
there's
that.
a question here that
Yeah. Please ask away. So I don't know if I'm breaking up or if Mollie's breaking up. It's a surprise. We don't know.
it's a
But ask the
surprise.
question. It's a surprise. I don't know when we're going to find out the answer to the surprise. But yeah, whenever you want. Oh, reassurance. But many say it's temporarily and makes OCD worse. Okay. Well, yeah, within the realm of OCD, I maybe can take a very brief detour if that's all right by you.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's so much about the perfectionistic piece, but we can certainly. Um, so basically, any sort of compulsive behavior like excessive reassurance seeking is going to sometimes lead you to feel better. And the problem with that is that the next time that you have a thought and you have a feeling, you're now beholden to ask for reassurance in order to alleviate that feeling. So it's basically like we call it it's negative reinforcement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have a headache and you take an Advil and the headache goes away, then you're more likely to take an Advil next time you have a headache. Oh, wait, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
We got more.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question as well. Okay, we'll be right there because I want to address your question too. Um, so yeah, that is the problem with reassurance. It's not inherently problematic per se, like, and there is non-compulsive reassurance, but the idea is that we want to learn how to be with the feeling, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think if we can wrap this back around to perfectionism, right, it's about learning how to be with the discomfort of
Yeah.
not living up or not being enough or whatever the story is that goes with that.
Right, right. And that story piece is crucial. I kind of want to touch on this question that just came through.
Yeah, please.
She's saying it's hard to be mindful about my shame. And yes, absolutely. Where I would draw your attention is that shame, sure, it's a feeling, but it also comes with a narrative. And
Mm,
when we're looking at how to be mindful of shame, what I'd encourage you to do is can you be mindful of the narrative? Can you draw out what it is you're actually telling yourself? And with that, by creating a little language around it, to create a little bit of distance. And I absolutely get I'm imperfect and there's going to be shame around that. And there's got to be room for the imperfection. We're also got to make room for the shame. This isn't about trying to amputate shame. This is about including it, which is why it may seem counterintuitive to lean into it and to get curious about that shame rather than wanting to backpedal and not go near that shame. That's the instinct. But the real work is in leaning into it, asking, what are you trying to tell me? What is the narrative of this shame? So we can start to see it and we can start to work with it. Um, Go ahead, Mollie.
yeah. I was just going to say, I think that differentiating between the emotional experience and the
Mm-hmm,
thought experience is what you're saying. And it's so important because, especially in the work of mindfulness, I think it's less about going into the content of
mm-hmm,
I'm bad, this is why I'm bad. It's to watch that content is coming up without taking the bait.
mm-hmm,
And so that's a component of shame, that when you notice that you've been caught up in the content, that you drop into the emotion, you drop
mm-hmm,
into the physical experience that you're having of shame, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um and learning like just how to be with that. So, and I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's helpful to even take it a step back and not call it shame, because I
Mm-hmm,
think we have so many conceptualizations of like, and same with anxiety, same with anger, that it's just, oh, this is this feeling,
right,
right? Like I'm
right,
feeling
right.
this experience and it comes with this narrative, and I don't need to go into the narrative because it's just a bunch of words. All I
Mm-hmm,
need to need to do is be willing to have this experience, if
right,
that's not
right.
too nebulous what I just
No, no, no.
said.
I think it makes a lot of sense, and I'd be curious to know for those that are listening, what you think and if this resonates.
Yeah, or if you have any
The
other
other thing,
questions.
yeah, absolutely. The other thing that comes to mind is, when you talked about, again, I love this idea of when you meditate, you're going into the vacuum. And to see that that shame is not coming from anywhere else, that is completely internally generated. And
Yeah.
in that, that gives us agency. That's good information for us to have, that this is something that is just coming out in the same way that I can be across from someone and have the thought, man, I want to kick this person in the shins. And I don't have to go down that rabbit hole or actually do it. We can also have a
Right.
thought that looks, feels, smells, tastes like shame without going down the rabbit hole of following it and figuring out what it has to say to us. That we
Well, and
have a little
without
bit of
actually
agency.
having done anything that would, and this is really interesting because this is what you're saying right now, is that it could be unnecessary guilt, it could be irrational, and absolutely, I
Right,
think that's
right.
what we're talking about with the fact that if you close your eyes, you're in this vacuum, that it's, it's coming out of nowhere and it's not necessarily indicative of anything, right? It's
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
like this sort of random experience. By the way, we've got this countdown happening, which makes me think now that air
Real
quote.
time.
Oh my gosh, that went
It's
quick.
time. Guys, we're
Um,
wrapping up.
Wrapping it up, but hey, if anyone has any other um, themes that you'd like us to consider,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, just like intrusive thoughts, agreed that like that it can be a thought about guilt that's totally nonsense. Um, So yeah, we're for our next one. We'd love any feedback about what you guys would like to discuss. And as always, we welcome any questions. We'll be posting this on the YouTube page.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. And I'm thinking too, and we'll talk about this, but maybe of starting an Instagram live page, just because it like not Instagram live page, an Instagram
An
TV
Instagram
page,
paid. Oh, I see what you're saying. IGTV.
so that people can just access it here instead of YouTube. But we can talk about that later. Please send us ideas if you have questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And thanks for joining me. I love our chats and
Yeah.
thanks for indulging us and letting us speak out about working with perfectionism, you guys.
We really do. Like, this is what we do when we hang out. Remember the time